being an Indian American and like a second generation, it definitely does give you not an identity crisis, but it does give you two different identities. When I was growing up in elementary school, like I had to be very sure of myself, and be very strong and like know who I am. And I think that translated to McDonald's because you'll get a lot of customers and you'll get a lot of people who will kind of disregard your humanity in a sense, where they won't even recognize you as a person. They're just kind of there. You're just there to provide a service. Being very sure of who I am and like, this is not how you treat people or this is not how you go about your business and things like that. So that definitely helped in my confidence and like dealing with some pretty crazy situations.
What inspired you to write Drive-Thru Diaries?
So initially, I wasn't planning on writing a book about my experiences, but I like journaling sometimes. So if something really fun or crazy happens to me, I like writing it down. Just sometimes it's fun to look back on those things. And I remember writing down so many things that had happened to me at McDonald's because I think that the time that I worked there was a really crucial period because I had never had a first job before. So it was my first job. And I had come from a private school, so there's this kind of expectation of being like, giving respect to everybody around you and being kind and all those things. And I don't think I really understood what it was like to, I guess, enter the real world where not everybody is going to be as kind or forthcoming as kids in your school. And so the stories that I had were pretty, I would say, different than what I was used to. And when I was going through my journal, I realized like there were so many fun stories and so many learning so many lessons, and so that's why I decided that I could take these lessons and turn it into a book for another kid who maybe wants to have a little bit of an easier transition.
Okay, awesome. Why McDonald's as a first job? Any specific reason?
So there's a few different reasons. So one of them is it's actually funny. My parents used to say like if you don't do your homework, you're gonna work at McDonald's. Like that's literally one of their, I guess, they were scolding me like it's a threat, but I just thought it was funny because, I wanted to work there and see what it was actually like. And then also my friend, he worked at McDonald's, so he had a job there, so it was kind of an easier process because he got me the job. But yeah.
So, speaking of like your parents, growing up in like the a kind of household where, maybe parents are a little bit more stricter, more focused on
Mhm.
academics, teach you certain values you might not get in other households. How do
Mhm.
you think your Indian heritage and upbringing influenced your experience at McDonald's and maybe how you went about certain situations?
I would definitely say that they taught me to be very confident in who I am. And also, I would say that being an Indian American and like a second generation, or like be growing up here versus my parents growing up in India, it definitely does give you not an identity crisis, but it does give you two different identities. So, I mean, as when I was growing up in elementary school, like I had to be very sure of myself, and be very strong and like know who I am. And I think that translated to McDonald's because you'll get a lot of customers and you'll get a lot of people who will kind of disregard your humanity in a sense, where they won't even recognize you as a person. They're just kind of there. You're just there to provide a service. But I think that like being very sure of who I am and like, this is not how you treat people or this is not how you go about your business and things like that. So that definitely helped in my confidence and like dealing with some pretty crazy situations.
Do you have a specific crazy situation that you would like to talk about?
Um, there was one time where a customer didn't really like what they had. They like kind of threw it back through the window on us. So yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And
Interesting.
then like this didn't happen to me, but my friend got money, like hard coins thrown at him. So there's definitely a lot of things that you just wouldn't expect to happen. Like especially from coming from an adult, I would say. But I mean, you learn to deal with those things, but it's definitely not something that you would expect to come with the job.
With all of these experiences, how was your maybe opinion or viewpoint of the general public? How has it changed?
I think before I was definitely very naive. And that sounds so stupid because I know I'm only 17, so clearly I have a lot to see. But definitely you do think that there is a certain decorum to be upheld, I guess, every single time that you are exiting the house. You treat people with politeness. And you kind of represent your family and yourself. But I think that's what I thought of the world before I began working. And after I began working, again, like I said, like people did not really view me as human, honestly. Like it was really just I'm there to provide them a service. And granted, obviously, like I was getting paid to provide them a service, but I don't think that means we should disregard the fact that service workers are still human and they're, you know, still deserving of respect. But yeah.
So, what surprised you most about working at this job?
Oh, what surprised me most was it was actually a very difficult job. Like there's a very fast-paced nature in fast food. Um, and like there's like we time the cars. So for example, the average will be like 55 seconds per car. So we take the order within this amount of time, we get their food to them in this amount of time. And you have to meet those times. So it was a very fast-paced nature, and when you're working like in the actual like drive like through shop area, there's a lot of things going on at once. So you're like making drinks, so it gets slippery. You could be handing food, you'd be taking orders, like it's all happening all at once, and it's very chaotic. It's very hectic. So I think it definitely taught me to multitask very well and not crack under pressure. Because also at the same time, you're getting customers who are, maybe frustrated or it's a hot day and you're getting that kind of feedback from them as well. So it definitely taught me that you should appreciate your service workers and that not everything is their fault. Sometimes there are things that just cannot be helped. So yeah,
Cool. So, I mean, you're still in school, right? You're still in high school. How did you balance writing this book and going to school and everything?
it was definitely, it was definitely an effort to make the time to write the book. It was during, like, majority of the process was during my junior year, which was pretty strenuous. Just because junior year, all the hard classes, all the SAT, ACT, just everything kind of just in one year. But I will say that if you're really passionate about something, like my mom has always told me this, and I've always heard it, like if you're really passionate about something, you will make that time for it. So even like a few hours in a week, or just like during lunch if I had time, I would say the most interesting part about this entire process was not actually writing the book. Writing the book was easy, but getting it published and the actual process of editing and the illustrations and getting it to be actually, like available for the public and making sure that it was kind of not perfect, but it was as good as it can be. Nothing is ever perfect. So that part was definitely hard, but it was a very fun process.
Right. So, do you think you could walk us through that process? Like the writing you said was, just kind of came to you, the publishing, the editing. Walk us through that, and then do you have any advice for anybody?
Yeah. So, after the writing, you kind of build a manuscript of how do you pitch it to publishing companies. I decided to go through Friesen Press, which is a self-publishing company. So what happens is you send them like your initial copy, and then there's rounds of editing that you go back and forth between their editors. And you kind of implement their suggestions, obviously. So their suggestions can range from like literally like, oh, you missed a comma here, to quite frankly, just rework this entire chapter. So there's a lot of range. And I would say like from the start to finish, it's not as if my book was unrecognizable, but it was from the start to finish, it definitely had taken a lot of different turns that did not expect. But I think that's the beauty of the editing is like when you have someone else's perspective, you can understand like what they're looking for as well. So once the editing was done, then it became more, how can this be appealing to read for specifically a teenager, right? Like teenagers have not the best attention span and they kind of want like quick how do I say, quick gratification. So I mean it became like, okay, how can I make this entertaining, like the illustrations? So my dad's friend did the illustrations, but we went back and forth of like, okay, this is what I envision in my mind as the scene, and how can we make that come to life in an illustration? So that was actually a really fun process. And I really wanted the illustrations to be colored so that you could really understand like what I was talking about. Because there's like a scene in that I described that happened to me where I managed to drench the entire McDonald's in a strawberry banana smoothie. And I don't really think I can put that into words without an illustration. Honestly, the entire thing was horrifying, but
Okay.
so yeah. So those were some of the fun illustrations. And then after it became, like the cover and things like that, those were also part of the illustration. After, once the book was actually published, then it became like, okay, how can I share my book with the public? So promotions or, just lots of cold emails to different magazines, local news, TV channels, libraries, things like that.
How long did this entire thing take you from start to finish?
Um, it's taken about a year and a half
Wow.
from
Okay.
start to end.
So nobody can just write a book.
I would definitely say you need to commit to it, and it takes some patience. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. What do you hope that people will take away from your book?
I really hope that they will take away that you can learn from anything, and that sounds so cliche, but like it honestly, 3 months at McDonald's taught me a lot. Like I matured a lot, and I learned how to open my banking account, how to talk to an adult without, cowering behind, my manager or and asserting them, right? Asserting that I'm actually a person and, those things. And I think that learning from everything you do is really important and actually taking it beyond. So, like taking a McDonald's job and turning it into a book. Like, there are just always ways that you can learn from your experiences.
Right. Okay. So you mentioned you worked there for 3 months. Why did you leave?
I left because I had to start school, and honestly, balancing school and a job is really admirable, and I applaud anyone who does it. But the rigorous culture in my school, I just don't think it would have worked well.
Right. Okay. So you got your fit paycheck. What do you think your advice to someone who's getting their first paycheck should be? Save it or spend it?
So it's so funny you say that because in the beginning I had this like idea. I was like, okay, with the money that I earn by the end of this, like I'm gonna buy myself like a really nice necklace or whatever. You know what I mean? But I actually talk about this in the book that my friend talked about how she saved it and bought her mom dinner or did some nice things for her family or saved it. And I guess that really changed my perspective because also at the time I was 15, 14, 15, 15. And so like a 15-year-old, I feel like at that time I was just like, just buy the necklace. But I saved it. And I'm hoping to put it towards college or just little things to help around the house. But yeah, I definitely obviously spend your money, treat yourself, but at the same time, when you have money, you learn the value of money, and it's important to understand how to save it too. So yeah.
Have you gotten any like feedback on the book? Like what's the most most impactful or most exciting feedback you've gotten?
The most exciting feedback. I have to think about that. I would say people thought it was very entertaining to read, and I wanted it to be entertaining. I didn't want it to be a book that, you put it down and you were just like, oh, it's just boring. But I wanted it to be very descriptive and comedic, and I wanted people to get a laugh out of it. Because I did. Hopefully they will. But I put a lot of my lessons in bullet points just because I really wanted like the teens who are reading this to actually take something away from it. So Yeah, that was one of someone did tell me that the lessons were very easy to follow because I did make it in that format. So I guess that was one of the things.
What's next now? For your writing career after high school, is this a big thing?
So I'm actually I want to enter medicine, but I do really, really like writing and I like the creative outlet. And I also like the actual journey, the process of making myself sit down and think. I don't know what I would write in the future, but I think that I would actually think turning to fiction would be a fun kind of turn of events. So I'm not really sure.